The restaurant was busy, brighter than it had been all week. The chandeliers glimmered like little stars, and soft music floated through the air. Barely noticeable, but just enough to make the space feel elegant. Among all the tables with fancy glasses and neatly folded napkins, a young waitress moved quickly, balancing a tray of drinks without spilling a drop. Her name didn't matter much here. She was just one of the many workers, the kind people noticed only when she made a mistake or dropped something. But even in that crowded room, she carried herself with quiet determination, smiling at guests and offering polite words, never letting them see the stress behind her eyes. Her days were long, often starting before sunrise. She lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, a place that felt too tight for her dreams. Every morning she would wake, stretch, and get ready to face another day of taking orders, carrying trays, and answering questions with patience she sometimes didn't feel. Money was always tight. Bills piled up on her little kitchen table, and sometimes she had to choose between buying food or paying for the broken heater. Despite all that, she never complained. Complaining, she believed, didn't solve anything. The young woman had a secret that few people knew. While her hands were skilled at holding trays and refilling glasses, they were also capable of something more beautiful. At home, tucked away in a corner, she had a small piano, scratched and a little worn from years of use, but it was hers. Every evening after work, when the world outside had quieted down, she would sit on the piano bench and let her fingers dance across the keys. Music was her escape, a world where she could breathe without fear, a place where she could dream of more than the life she lived. Her neighbors often heard soft melodies drifting from her apartment. Sometimes it was a classical piece she had learned years ago. Other times it was something she had made up herself, letting the music follow her feelings without any rules. Music was her language, the way she expressed herself when words felt too small. But she never played in public, not because she doubted her talent, but because she had learned early on that the world didn't always welcome dreams that seemed too big. The restaurant she worked in was one of those places where the wealthy came to be seen as much as to eat. The chandeliers were crystal, the carpets thick and soft, and the menus offered dishes she had to carefully pronounce so she wouldn't sound foolish. The guests were used to being waited on by people who seemed invisible, moving in the background but always attentive. She had learned to move quickly, to anticipate their needs before they asked, to smile even when she was exhausted. It was a skill she had honed over years of working in similar places, and it had become almost instinctual. Despite the work being tiring, there were moments that reminded her why she endured it all. Sometimes a guest would notice her kindness, leaving a little extra tip or offering a word of encouragement. Those small moments made her feel seen, even if only briefly. But mostly, she kept her dreams to herself, playing her music at home, imagining a life where people listened to her because they wanted to, not because they were obligated. On this particular day, the restaurant was hosting an exclusive crowd. People who could afford anything they wanted had gathered for a private event. She had served many wealthy guests before, but there was something different about this group. The atmosphere was heavier, more expectant. Guests talked in low voices, laughing softly, sipping expensive wine, and casting glances around the room as if judging everything they saw. She felt a flutter of nervousness as she moved between tables, trying not to spill drinks or drop a plate. Every step seemed heavier today, not because of the work, but because she sensed something unusual in the air. She had been running orders for hours, her feet sore, her back aching, when she noticed a group gathering near the stage at the far end of the room. The stage was empty, a grand piano sitting there like a silent promise. Usually, a professional musician would be hired for events like this, someone trained and polished, someone whose fingers could move across the keys like magic. But today, for some reason, there was no one to play. The guests murmured among themselves, glancing at the empty piano as if it were an unfinished painting. She paused for a moment, feeling a strange connection to the instrument. It called to her in a way that was impossible to ignore. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. Not here, not now, she told herself. She was just a waitress, nothing more. But her heart raced, and her fingers twitched as if they remembered the songs she had played that morning. The piano was no longer just a piece of furniture. It was a bridge to the life she had imagined for herself in quiet moments. Her mind wandered back to her apartment, to the soft notes she had practiced that day, each one a small rebellion against the ordinary world she inhabited. As she carried another tray of drinks, she overheard a guest whisper to another, commenting on the absence of music. The words hit her in a strange way, a mix of fear and opportunity twisting inside her chest. She wondered what would happen if she were to play, just for a few moments, to fill the silence that was beginning to weigh on the room. Could she? Would anyone even notice? The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Despite the nerves, she found herself drawn to the piano. Each step she took toward it felt heavy and light at the same time. She had played in front of no one but herself for years, learning to trust her fingers and the sounds they produced. But an exclusive crowd, all eyes on her, was an entirely different matter. She could imagine every possible outcome. Embarrassment, laughter, admiration, awe. The possibilities made her heart pound harder than the long day of running orders ever had. She set down her tray on a nearby table, her hands shaking slightly. The room seemed to slow as she approached the piano, the murmurs of the crowd fading into a background hum. She sat on the bench, her feet barely touching the floor, and looked at the keys, polished and gleaming under the warm lights. For a moment, she thought about standing up and walking away, pretending she had been called to another task. But something inside her, something quiet and persistent, told her to stay. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let her hands hover over the keys. The first note she pressed was soft, almost tentative, but it carried through the room like a single thread of light. She felt the music flow from her fingers, a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. It was as if the piano had been waiting for her all along, eager to speak through her. Her confidence grew with each note, and soon she was no longer thinking about the crowd or the potential embarrassment. She was only thinking about the music, letting it fill the space around her and wrap the room in sound. The guests turned toward her, surprised by the sudden music. Whispers rippled through the crowd, curiosity replacing the impatience that had been building. No one had expected the quiet waitress to produce such sound, such emotion. The music was delicate at first, like a gentle wave. Then it grew, sweeping through the room with power and grace. Every note she played carried a piece of her life, a fragment of her dreams, and the struggles she had endured. By the time she finished the first piece, the room was silent, a collective breath held in awe. She opened her eyes and saw the guests staring at her, some with wide eyes, others with mouths slightly open. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen, not as a waitress, not as someone invisible, but as a person with talent and a voice that could touch hearts. Her chest swelled with a mix of relief and pride, and a small, shy smile appeared on her face. The moment passed quickly, and she stood, a little shaky but filled with a new sense of possibility. She returned to her duties, but everything felt different now. The music had changed something in the room, in her, in the way she saw herself. The guests whispered among themselves, clearly impressed, and a few even offered nods and smiles of genuine admiration. She walked past them, carrying trays, but her mind lingered on the piano, on the power of the music, and on the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The evening continued, the restaurant buzzing with chatter, clinking glasses, and the occasional laugh from guests who felt comfortable in the elegance around them. The young waitress moved from table to table, balancing trays as she took orders and served drinks. Her hands had grown steady over the years, and her smile never wavered, even as fatigue pulled at her shoulders. She had just set down a glass of sparkling water for a couple at a corner table when she noticed something unusual near the stage. The grand piano was still empty, and the whispers of the guests seemed to be growing louder, as if the absence of music was becoming impossible to ignore. Curiosity tugged at her, and she stole a quick glance at the group gathered by the stage. They were important people, their attention sharp, their expectations clear. She had learned to read the room quickly, to anticipate moods and reactions, and she could feel the tension in the air. Something was missing, and it wasn't just the music. The atmosphere felt incomplete, as though everyone present knew it but didn't dare say it out loud. The waitress felt her heartbeat quicken. A tiny, persistent thought crept into her mind. What if she could be the one to fill that silence? She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. It wasn't the right place, and she wasn't the right person. She was a waitress, trained in service, not performance. But the piano kept calling her, the polished keys gleaming under the warm light, almost daring her to sit down and play. She remembered the melodies she had practiced at home earlier that day, the soft notes she had created that made her heart feel lighter. She pressed her fingers to her palms, imagining the sensation of the keys under her touch, the way the music had always flowed from her mind to her hands. The manager of the event, a tall man with a sharp suit and a precise manner, approached her as she paused near the stage. He had noticed her staring at the piano. "Do you play?" he asked, his tone a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The question was simple, but it carried a weight she wasn't prepared for. Her mind raced. If she said yes, it could mean embarrassment, ridicule, or worse, failing in front of this exclusive crowd. If she said no, the moment would pass, and she would forever wonder what might have been. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "A little," she admitted softly, almost as if she were confessing a secret. The manager raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "A little won't be enough for this crowd," he said, glancing at the guests who were still murmuring, their attention subtly drifting toward the empty piano. The words stung, but they also ignited a spark inside her. She had played in front of no one before, yet she felt a strange certainty that this was her moment, that the music needed to be heard. Before she could speak again, one of the guests, a distinguished older man with kind eyes but a commanding presence, stepped forward. He had been watching quietly, observing the interactions with careful interest. "If she can play," he said, his voice calm but firm, "let's see what she can do." The words were unexpected, almost like a challenge, and the young waitress felt a mixture of fear and determination. She nodded hesitantly, trying to steady her racing heart. As she approached the piano, her steps felt heavy, yet each one carried a quiet resolve. The guests' murmurs faded as if the room itself held its breath. She adjusted the bench, her hands trembling slightly as she rested them on the keys. For a moment, doubt tried to creep back in, whispering that she wasn't ready, that she would falter. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and remembered the countless evenings she had spent alone at her piano, learning, practicing, and dreaming. That memory grounded her, and she let it flow into her fingers. The first note sounded soft, almost hesitant, but it resonated in the room, cutting through the hushed whispers. She let the second note follow, then the third, and soon her hands moved with confidence, guided by instinct and passion. The music swelled, filling the space with warmth and beauty, surprising both her and the guests. They had expected someone polished, trained, professional. Instead, they were listening to raw talent, a gift that seemed to come directly from the heart. The audience leaned in, captivated by the unexpected performance. The young waitress felt the fear melting away with each note, replaced by a sense of freedom and connection she had never experienced before. Every glance, every gasp of admiration, only strengthened her resolve. She realized that the music wasn't just for them. It was for her too, a declaration that she was more than the life she had been living, more than the role assigned to her. The piece she played was a melody she had composed herself, simple yet full of emotion. It told a story without words, a story of dreams, struggles, and hope. Her fingers danced across the keys, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes bold and commanding, capturing the attention of every guest. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched her intently, astonished at the skill and feeling she poured into every note. As the final chord lingered in the air, there was a pause, a collective intake of breath as the crowd absorbed what they had just witnessed. The young waitress felt her chest swell, a mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had taken a leap into the unknown and discovered a strength within herself she hadn't fully acknowledged before. The audience, equally amazed, erupted into applause, a warm, genuine appreciation that shook her to her core. The manager approached once again, his expression a mix of surprise and admiration. "I didn't know you had it in you," he admitted, offering a rare smile. The distinguished older guest nodded approvingly, his eyes twinkling with delight. "That was extraordinary," he said simply. But the weight of his words carried more meaning than any praise she had ever received. The young waitress felt a warmth spread through her body, a realization that this moment could change everything. As she returned to her duties, the crowd's whispers continued, but now they were filled with excitement and curiosity. Guests exchanged glances, some discussing her talent, others speculating about what opportunities might lie ahead for someone who could play like that. The young waitress moved through the restaurant with a new sense of confidence, her steps lighter, her heart soaring. She had faced fear, embraced her gift, and discovered that sometimes, taking a chance was the only way to truly live. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, but the memory of those few minutes at the piano stayed with her, echoing in her mind like a promise of what could come next. She knew her life had shifted, even if she couldn't yet see how far this new path might take her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her music mattered, where her talent could be recognized, and where she could finally step out of the shadows and into the light. The thought filled her with a quiet hope, a determination to embrace every opportunity that might come her way, no matter how unexpected or frightening it might seem. The room had fallen silent, the usual hum of chatter replaced by an expectant tension that made every sound sharper, every movement more noticeable. The young waitress sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the polished keys, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingertips. Her heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and nervousness swirling inside her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the rapid rhythm of her pulse, and allowed her eyes to close for just a moment. In that brief instant, she felt a connection to the music that had always lived inside her, a voice that spoke in melodies rather than words. When she pressed the first key, the note floated softly into the air, delicate and tentative. She listened to it, felt it resonate through the wood of the piano and into the floor beneath her. The room seemed to hold its breath, the guests leaning slightly forward in their seats, curious and intrigued. She let her fingers find the next note, then the next, each one building upon the other, forming a simple melody at first. The music grew, flowing from her hands with increasing confidence, and she felt a strange exhilaration. This was no longer just a performance. It was a release, a declaration, a piece of herself that she was finally sharing with the world. The melody shifted, becoming richer, more complex, weaving through emotions she had carried quietly for years. Joy, sorrow, hope, and longing all merged together in a symphony of feeling. The guests were captivated, some closing their eyes to listen more closely, others watching her intently, astonished at the depth and skill she displayed. There was a purity to her music that couldn't be learned in schools or taught by teachers. It came from experience, from living a life that had known both struggle and small triumphs. Every note seemed to tell a story, and the story was hers. Her hands moved with increasing confidence, dancing across the keys with a rhythm that felt both spontaneous and deliberate. She played faster, then slower, the tempo shifting with her emotions, guiding the audience through a journey without words. The music filled the corners of the room, bouncing softly off the walls, wrapping around the guests like a gentle embrace. She could feel the energy of the crowd changing, the subtle shifts in posture and expression as they became more and more absorbed in what she was creating. The initial surprise on their faces had melted into admiration, and now they were witnessing something truly unexpected. The young waitress had never felt more alive. Every note was a declaration of who she was and what she could do. She remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, fingers sore from repetition, eyes strained from concentration, heart heavy with unspoken dreams. All of it had led to this moment. She realized that fear had been only a temporary visitor, a shadow that now seemed distant and small compared to the brightness of the music she was producing. She let herself get lost in it, letting her emotions guide her hands, letting the piano speak for her in a language that words could never reach. As she played, she noticed subtle reactions in the crowd. A couple of guests leaned in closer, their eyes wide with admiration. An older gentleman had his hand over his heart, as if touched deeply by the music. A young woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, clearly moved. The room was no longer just a gathering of the wealthy and powerful. It had become a shared space of emotion, a place where everyone present was connected by the music. She felt a sense of unity, a rare and beautiful moment where the barrier between performer and audience seemed to disappear. The melody grew even more intricate, weaving together chords and harmonies that told a story of struggle and resilience. She remembered the nights when she had little money for food, the mornings when she woke before dawn to prepare for long shifts, the loneliness and quiet moments when she had no one to share her dreams with. All those experiences had shaped the music, given it depth and soul. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt a release of everything she had carried inside, as though the piano was absorbing all the weight she had been holding. The room seemed to breathe with her, each note a heartbeat that resonated through the air. The guests were spellbound. Whispers of astonishment fluttered through the room, but none dared speak too loudly, afraid to break the delicate spell. The music was more than just sound. It was emotion made tangible, a living thing that seemed to grow and shift with each movement of her hands. She could feel the audience's energy feeding into her, a silent encouragement that gave her the courage to continue, to explore the limits of her own abilities. The young waitress had never experienced anything like this, never imagined that she could touch so many hearts with her gift. As the performance reached its peak, the music became more daring, more expressive. She played with a freedom she had never allowed herself before, letting her imagination guide her fingers. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of her playing, the guests completely captivated. Some leaned back, letting the music wash over them, eyes closed in quiet appreciation. Others watched with rapt attention, noticing the precision, the emotion, the way she seemed to communicate without words. The energy was electric, a shared experience that transcended social status, wealth, and expectation. She reached the final passage, a delicate and tender sequence that slowed the tempo, drawing the performance to a close. Her fingers lingered on the last notes, allowing them to fade naturally, leaving a gentle echo in the room. Silence followed, thick and profound, as if everyone was holding their breath, savoring the final moments of the music. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and amazement at what she had just accomplished. For a brief moment, she was no longer just a waitress. She was an artist, a creator, someone who could share a part of herself with the world in a way that left an impact. Then the applause began. At first, a few claps here and there, cautious and polite, but it quickly grew into a standing ovation. The sound of hands clapping filled the room, accompanied by cheers and whistles. Guests rose to their feet, some moving closer to the stage, clearly wanting to express their admiration personally. She felt a rush of warmth, her heart swelling with the recognition that she had touched these people, that her music had reached them in a way she had never dared to hope for. The manager approached, a rare smile breaking across his face. "That was incredible," he said, his voice sincere. The distinguished older gentleman nodded approvingly, his eyes shining. "Extraordinary," he said simply. The young waitress felt a wave of emotion, realizing that her courage to play had created a moment of magic, a shared experience that would be remembered by everyone in that room. She returned to her duties, her movements lighter, her steps more confident, and her heart filled with a sense of possibility she had never known before. As she moved through the restaurant, the guests continued to speak in hushed tones, sharing their amazement with each other. Some approached her directly, complimenting her. Others simply watched from a distance, still captivated by what they had witnessed. The young waitress felt a mixture of humility and pride, aware that this was only the beginning of a journey she had long imagined but never dared to start. She realized that taking this risk, stepping into the spotlight despite fear, had opened a door she could never close again. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to truly imagine a future where her talent was recognized, where her music mattered, where she could share her gift without hesitation. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge to a life she had always dreamed of, a symbol of courage, hope, and possibility. The applause, the admiration, and the awe of the audience were confirmation that her dreams were not impossible, that they could become real if she was brave enough to take the steps necessary to reach them. As the evening drew to a close, the young waitress felt a sense of completion, a quiet satisfaction that came from having shared something deeply personal and beautiful. She returned to her table of duties, but her mind lingered on the piano, on the music, on the faces of the guests who had witnessed her performance. She knew that this moment would stay with her forever, a turning point in her life, a reminder that courage and talent could change everything. And deep down, she knew that the world she had once thought so small and confining was suddenly filled with possibilities, ready for her to explore and claim with both hands. The applause continued, swelling louder and louder until the young waitress realized she was no longer just sitting at a piano. She was standing at the edge of a moment that could change her life. The room had shifted, every guest leaning in, their expressions a mixture of awe, delight, and disbelief. Some were still clapping, some were whispering to each other, and others were simply staring, lost in thought, clearly affected by the unexpected brilliance they had just witnessed. She felt her heart race, a strange mixture of exhilaration and nervousness running through her veins. For years, she had dreamed of being recognized, of letting her talent be seen beyond the walls of her small apartment. Yet nothing could have prepared her for this. The intensity of the reactions, the way the audience had absorbed her music, how it had reached them in a way she never imagined possible. She returned to her duties, moving through the tables with trays, but the weight of their admiration clung to her like a warm cloak. Every guest she passed now looked at her differently, seeing not just a waitress, but someone with talent, courage, and a story. A few guests approached her directly, their words careful and sincere. "That was incredible," one said, his voice low and respectful. "We had no idea you could play like that. Do you perform often?" Another shook her hand gently, almost reverently, saying, "Your music is beautiful. You must share it more often." Each compliment felt like a ripple, spreading outward from her heart, reminding her that the risk she had taken had been worth every second. She smiled politely, feeling a mixture of humility and pride, unsure of how to fully express what the moment meant to her. The manager, usually a figure of authority and strictness, approached with an expression she had never seen on his face before. "I'm impressed," he said, nodding. "Truly impressed. You have a gift, and you've shared it with the world tonight. That's something special." His words were simple, yet they carried weight. In a place where appearances and rules usually ruled over everything, he had acknowledged her talent without reservation. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet sense of validation that she had longed for, and she realized that this recognition could open doors she had never dared to imagine. From the far end of the room, a distinguished older guest made his way toward her, moving with deliberate steps that commanded attention. His eyes held kindness but also a sharp intelligence, as though he had already evaluated her talent and determined its value. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "You have something rare," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've seen many performers, but few possess the depth and emotion you display. Your music moves people, and that is a gift that should not be hidden. Have you considered sharing it with a wider audience?" She blinked, caught off guard by his words. Her heart thumped, a mixture of excitement and fear twisting inside her. Could this really be happening? Was this an opportunity? A chance for her to step into a world she had only dreamed of? She nodded slowly, her mind racing. "I've always played, but mostly for myself," she admitted softly. "I never thought anyone would listen, let alone appreciate it." The older guest smiled knowingly. "Sometimes the world needs someone to take that first step. Tonight you did, and it has not gone unnoticed." He paused, glancing around at the other guests who were still watching, some whispering, some clapping softly in appreciation. "I believe your talent deserves more than occasional performances. If you're willing, I can help you find a way to share it with others, to reach people who will be moved by your music." just as we were tonight. She felt her breath catch in her throat, overwhelmed by the gravity of his offer. The chance he was presenting could change her life forever. But it was also intimidating, a world far removed from the safe familiarity of her daily routine. As the evening continued, the energy in the room remained electric. Guests discussed her performance in hushed tones, clearly still captivated by what they had experienced. Some were making arrangements, talking quietly about possible connections, invitations, or opportunities for her to perform in other settings. She moved through the space, carrying drinks and answering questions, but she felt as if she were floating, as though the ground beneath her had shifted to a new dimension of possibility. Her mind replayed the music she had just played, the expressions on the faces of those who had listened, and the validation she had received from people who had the means and influence to help her. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where music was not just a hobby, a secret passion, but a central part of her existence. She envisioned performing in concert halls, sharing her compositions with audiences who would be moved by every note. She imagined people traveling just to hear her play, feeling the same emotions she poured into each melody. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time, but it filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The manager and the distinguished guest continued to observe her, speaking quietly with each other, clearly impressed. At one point, the older man approached her again, offering guidance and encouragement. "Opportunities will come," he said gently. "You've taken the first step, but you must continue to embrace your gift, to nurture it and allow it to grow. The world needs your music, and you must not shy away from it." His words resonated deeply, a quiet affirmation that the path ahead, though uncertain, was worth pursuing. She felt a sense of determination rising within her, a newfound courage that urged her to take every chance offered, to explore every possibility, and to trust in her own abilities. As the guests gradually began to leave, many stopping to express their admiration once more, she felt a sense of closure to the evening that was both satisfying and bittersweet. The piano now sat silent, but the echoes of her music lingered, filling the room with a warmth that seemed to follow her as she continued her work. She moved with a lightness she had never known, her steps almost dancing as she carried trays and served guests. The recognition she had received, the validation of her talent, and the acknowledgement of her potential all blended together, creating a powerful sense of hope and possibility. After the last guests had departed, the restaurant quieted down. She finally had a moment to breathe, sitting in a corner and reflecting on everything that had happened. The applause, the compliments, the offers of support. It all felt surreal, almost like a dream she could hardly believe was real. She thought about the older man's words, about the opportunities that might await her, and felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was a path she was now willing to walk, confident in her ability to face whatever challenges might come. She returned to the piano one last time before leaving for the night, running her fingers lightly across the keys, feeling the familiar connection that had always guided her. The room was empty, the lights dimmed, but the memory of the audience, the reactions, and the energy lingered in the air. She closed her eyes, imagining the music spreading beyond the walls of the restaurant, touching hearts in ways she had only dreamed of. For the first time, she felt that her talent was not just a private treasure, but a gift meant to be shared, capable of transforming not only her life but the lives of those who listened. As she walked home that night, her steps were lighter, her mind buzzing with possibilities. She thought about the paths that might open, the opportunities she might embrace, and the courage it had taken to play in front of that exclusive crowd. She realized that this moment was more than just a performance. It was a turning point, a chance to redefine her life and follow the music that had always lived within her. The night air felt fresher, the streets brighter, and the world seemed full of promise, waiting for her to step forward and claim the future she had long dreamed of. The next morning, the young waitress woke with a feeling she had never experienced before. The memory of the previous night's performance still lingered in her mind, fresh and vibrant, like a melody that refused to fade. She stretched and sat up on the edge of her bed, her heart still racing with excitement and anticipation. Her small apartment felt different somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed a fraction of the energy and hope that had filled the restaurant the night before. For the first time in a long time, she felt that the possibilities before her were endless, that the life she had only dreamed of could truly be within reach. As she prepared for her shift, she thought about the people she had met, especially the distinguished older guest who had approached her with words of encouragement. She wondered about the opportunities he had mentioned, the ways in which her music might reach a wider audience. The idea that someone had recognized her talent and believed in it was both exhilarating and intimidating. She had spent so long hidden away, playing only for herself, that the thought of stepping into a world where others would listen and appreciate her music made her pulse quicken with anticipation. When she arrived at the restaurant, the familiar sounds and sights greeted her, but they felt different now. The usual hustle and bustle seemed to carry an undercurrent of excitement, a subtle recognition from the staff and the guests who had been present the night before. She moved through the tables with confidence, her steps lighter, her smile brighter. The manager greeted her with a nod of approval, and she sensed a newfound respect in the way he looked at her. It was clear that last night had changed something, not just in her, but in the way others perceived her. As she began her duties, she received a message from the distinguished guest who had encouraged her the previous night. It was brief but filled with promise. An invitation to meet and discuss the possibilities for her music, to explore ways in which her talent could be shared with more people. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the message, a mixture of excitement and nervousness flooding through her. She realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for, the first step toward a future she had only imagined in private. The meeting was scheduled for the following day in a quiet, elegant room, away from the noise of the restaurant. When she arrived, the distinguished guest greeted her warmly, his demeanor calm and reassuring. He began by asking her about her experiences with music, how she had developed her skills, and what she hoped to achieve. She spoke openly, sharing her journey, her struggles, and her dreams, feeling a sense of liberation as she revealed the story behind the melodies she had created. He listened attentively, nodding and asking thoughtful questions, showing genuine interest in her passion and her perspective. After their conversation, he outlined several opportunities that could help her reach a wider audience. There were options for performances in local concert halls, invitations to collaborate with other musicians, and even possibilities for recording her own compositions. Each suggestion was filled with potential, a stepping stone toward the life she had long envisioned. She felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension, aware that these opportunities would require courage, dedication, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. Yet, the support and guidance he offered made the path ahead seem less daunting, more attainable, and filled with promise. Returning to her apartment that evening, she sat at her piano, her fingers tracing the familiar keys. The music flowed naturally, more freely than ever before, as if the validation and encouragement she had received had unlocked a new level of confidence within her. She experimented with melodies, allowed her emotions to guide her compositions, and felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that she had never experienced before. The piano had always been her refuge, but now it was also a bridge to a future that seemed increasingly within reach. In the days that followed, her life began to change in small but significant ways. Guests who had witnessed her performance approached her with genuine interest, offering connections and opportunities for her to share her music beyond the restaurant. Colleagues who had once seen her only as a waitress began to acknowledge her talent and dedication, treating her with a newfound respect. The restaurant itself became a place where she felt empowered, a stepping stone toward a broader stage rather than just a job she performed out of necessity. She started to perform in small venues, carefully chosen to help her build confidence and experience. Each performance was an opportunity to connect with an audience, to share a part of herself, and to grow as a musician. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, the applause and encouragement reinforcing her belief that she had found her true calling. With every note she played, she felt a deeper connection to her audience, a sense of fulfillment that surpassed anything she had experienced in her previous life of service. The young waitress also began composing her own music, inspired by her experiences, her emotions, and the world around her. She poured her heart into each piece, drawing from the struggles she had faced, the dreams she had nurtured, and the hope that had guided her through difficult times. Her compositions were rich, expressive, and authentic, resonating with listeners in a way that felt both personal and universal. She discovered that her music had the power to touch people's hearts, to evoke emotions and memories, and to create moments of shared understanding and connection. As her reputation grew, she found herself invited to perform at larger venues, collaborate with other musicians, and even participate in recordings that would reach audiences far beyond her city. Each opportunity brought new challenges, but also new rewards, reinforcing her commitment to her craft and her belief in the transformative power of music. She realized that the courage to take that first step at the restaurant, to play in front of an exclusive and critical audience, had been the catalyst for a life she had never dared to imagine. Despite the success and recognition, she remained grounded, remembering the long hours, the struggles, and the quiet moments when she had practiced alone in her apartment. Those experiences had shaped her, given her resilience, and deepened her connection to her music. She approached each new opportunity with gratitude and humility, aware that her journey was ongoing and that each performance, each composition, was a chance to grow, to learn, and to share a piece of herself with the world. In quiet moments, she would sit at her piano and reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. The restaurant, once a place of routine and hard work, had become the starting point of a life filled with possibility. The applause, the encouragement, and the recognition she had received had ignited a spark that continued to grow, illuminating a path toward a future that was vibrant, fulfilling, and deeply meaningful. She understood that her talent was not just a personal gift, but a bridge to connect with others, to inspire, to comfort, and to bring joy. The young waitress, now emerging as a musician with a growing audience, felt a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment. She had transformed fear into courage, doubt into confidence, and a hidden passion into a life-changing opportunity. Each day, she embraced her music, her performances, and her journey with determination and joy, knowing that the path she had chosen was one she was meant to follow. Her story became a testament to the power of talent, courage, and the willingness to step into the unknown, inspiring others to recognize and embrace the gifts within themselves. As she prepared for each performance, she remembered the night when she first sat at the grand piano in the restaurant, the exclusive crowd listening with anticipation and surprise. That moment had been a turning point, a doorway to a world she had only dreamed of, and it reminded her that taking a risk, believing in oneself, and sharing one's passion could open doors to opportunities beyond imagination. With each note she played, she carried the memory of that night, the lessons learned, and the excitement of a future still unfolding before her. The music was no longer just a private expression. It had become her voice, her purpose, and her path to a life filled with possibility, hope, and fulfillment.